Happy New Year, everybody. My resolution this year was to write more, and while progress on that has been mixed, it's gotten me thinking a lot about my writing and what makes it distinct from anyone else's. Prime example, last semester a professor pulled me aside and told me that all of my writing had really wide margins, and there was a lot of really awkward white space on all of the papers I wrote. I wondered why that could be, and I remembered that when I was in 4th grade, a teacher pulled me aside and told me that my writing was so messy and tiny that I had to leave every other space blank or she couldn't read anything I wrote. This apparently stuck with me for over 10 years. When you start making note of what writers wrote what musicals, it's actually easier than you would think to recognize the consistencies. All of Eben Kander's shows have female leads that are very cynical altos. All of the Gershwins have very wacky plots and over-the-top characters, because that's what was popular in the 30s. But things get a little bit more complicated when you're looking at someone like Stephen Sondheim, who was, to put it kindly, all over the place. Still, Stephen Sondheim is my guy and I wanted to talk about him, so I typed up a list of all of the things that his shows have in common. And by seeing which has all of them, you get to see that the most quintessential show is Company. I think that Company is really the perfect show to talk about this time of year because it's all about new beginnings and life milestones and change, things on people's mind around New Year's. Also, a friend of mine got me the script book for Christmas, so it's readily available.
Company is a concept musical, meaning that it has no linear plot. Instead, it's a collection of incidents in our main character's life. Each one either adds to or changes his perspective on the subject of marriage, and we follow him as he struggles to understand it and why he can't do it himself. You'll see what I mean. I should say before we get into this that in recent years there's been a gender-swapped version. I have a lot of opinions on that decision, but no one cares what I think, and I encourage you to check out both and form your own opinion. Still, for the purposes of this summary, we're sticking with the old-fashioned version.
I also want to say that while all the art and puppet stuff is my doing, all of the physical clips are from the 2006 Broadway revival directed by John Doyle. I actually managed to get one of the DVDs on eBay, and I would highly recommend that everyone checks out. It is an amazing performance.
Anyway, without further ado, wipe the shoe prints off your glass furniture, and if you're a mezzo-soprano, take a very deep breath, because we're talking about Company. Our story begins where else but New York City, where our main character Bobby is receiving phone calls from the members of the 5 married couples he is friends with.
This is the first of our sort of Sondheim tropes, and the one that makes it difficult for me specifically to talk about. If the man loved one thing, it is a massive cast. An average musical will have 5 or 6 characters. Company has 14. And this isn't even uncommon for Sondheim. Follies has about 12, Assassins has around 14, and if you extend things to minor characters, Into the Woods has going on 20. I like to sort of pull things aside to highlight notable casts, but with a cast of this size, it would get irritating, so we're just gonna run through everybody right now.
First up, our main character, Bobby. Bobby is an awful lot of things, but all you really need to know about him right now is that he is newly 35 years old, popular, and most importantly, unmarried. Our first couple is Sarah and Harry, basically your average crazy straight white couple who either love or hate each other depending on the moment, and especially the actors. Then we have Peter, seemingly the perfect husband, and his wife Susan, who's a sort of ditzy southern woman. Then we have Jenny and David, seemingly the most conservative of the bunch, especially Jenny. My personal favorites, Amy, who thinks a lot, and Paul, who doesn't. And last but very not least, we have Joan, or Joanne, depending on how many syllables you need to make the line work, and her third husband, Larry. Rounding out our cast list, we have Bobby's 3 main romantic prospects, a flight attendant named April, Marta, and Kathy. Got that? Good. All of Bobby's friends are gathered to surprise him on his 35th birthday. They sort of awkwardly mill about for a bit before gathering at the birthday cake, where Bobby tries and fails to blow out all the candles. The couples form a chorus echoing his name and singing about how much they love him while he sings about the joy of having friends that care about him the way they do. The party breaks up, and for a brief moment Bobby is left alone before joining Sarah and Harry for dinner. He notices that Harry isn't drinking, and with many corrections from Sarah, Harry explains that he was on a business trip in California when he got arrested for public intoxication and drunk driving, so he quit altogether. All the while, Sarah is asking Bobby to eat a brownie and let her watch. Harry explains that she's on a diet, and she begins rattling off her food cravings. He continues talking about food, and when she finally breaks and eats the brownie, Harry downs a glass of bourbon. Conversation turns to Sarah's karate lessons, and they beg her to show off her skills. Finally, she agrees, and she and Harry smack each other around a little bit as Joan and the other couples sing about how it's the little things you do that keep a marriage happy. Bobby breaks up the fight and announces that he has to leave. Sarah tells Harry she loves him and leaves as he downs another glass of bourbon. Once alone, Bobby asks Harry if he ever regrets getting married, and he explains that he both always and never regrets it. The other men agree and list off all the contradictions of marriage, how it's the best and the worst thing about their lives. Next up, Bobby goes to see Susan and Peter, and he tells them that he thinks they're absolutely the perfect couple. They surprise him by excitedly announcing their upcoming divorce. Bobby is shocked by this decision, especially because they don't seem any less married than they ever were. We transition to a night in with Jenny and David. They've put their kids to bed, and now everyone's hanging around smoking Jenny's very first joint. She insists that she feels nothing until she starts swearing, which Dave says she never does. They all have a good laugh until suddenly she asks Bobby why he isn't married. He insists that he's not resisting marriage, but they both deny that, so he tells them about the 3 women that he's been seeing. All of them join in, telling him that he is not ready to be married. April, Marta, and Kathy explain that he has the tendency to shower them with affection only to immediately lose all interest, then repeat the cycle until either they confront him and he breaks things off, or they get tired of waiting for him. Bobby offers another joint, but David declines, and even though Jenny seems to be having fun, he insists that she's too square, and she was only pretending to like it for him. That's the end of that, and the chorus of phone calls picks up again, this time with the couples telling Bobby that they each have a woman they think he'd get along with. The tone changes drastically, though, when the men split off with their personal recommendations. Every girl they suggest they only do because she's good in bed, and they want to live vicariously through him since he's their only single friend. It's very bad, and very sexist and all that, but it does have single-handedly my favorite lyric of all time. When Larry calls a woman the kind of girl you can send through the mails. Oh, it's awful. All of them encourage him to stay single and ask him why he wants to get married anyway. The question starts sarcastic, but as it echoes in his head, it gets more sincere. What do you want to get married for? He says to himself that somewhere out there a woman is waiting for him. One that will instantly make everything make sense, that will make everything easy, that has all the best features of his female friends. He promises the mystery woman that he's looking for her and begs her to wait for him. On that note, we better get to know his actual romantic prospects. Marta sings about the beauty of New York before we're pulled aside to see what Bobby and April are like together. She tells him that she spent 2 years at Northwestern University but was on probation the entire time for her bad grades. She flat out tells him that she's very dumb and that she's so boring she actively bores herself. Lovely. Bobby and Kathy have more chemistry, and he confesses that he was thinking of proposing to her, but he didn't think she'd say yes. She says she would, but now she's moved on, and actually she's just gotten engaged to another man and plans on leaving New York. On the flip side of that, Marta is basically the human personification of the city of New York. She's colorful, exciting, pretentious, and all around interesting in every way. Speaking of excitement, our next vignette belongs to Paul and Amy, and we're taken back in time to their wedding day, where Bobby is, as usual, never far behind, and in this instance is serving as best man. Paul is thrilled to finally be getting married, and Amy is having what has to be one of the most realistic panic attacks ever written. She has a lot of thoughts, and by a lot I mean most words per minute in Broadway history a lot. But it all boils down to she thinks that Paul is too good for her, and by marrying him she'll be ruining his chances of finding a better woman. Paul and Bobby finally come to talk to her, and she unloads everything. She lists off every problem she has with Paul, most of them being that he's too sweet and considerate, and like Bobby, she just wants to be alone. This is seemingly a common experience for them, as Paul is ready with a counterpoint to everything she says, and he doesn't seem at all concerned about any of it. Still, after a while, she tells him she doesn't love him enough, and it's hard to come back from that. He realizes he's talking to a brick wall, and he tells Bobby to tell the guests he left. As soon as they're alone, the realization of what she's just done dawns on Amy. You know how everyone in this is constantly saying Bobby is a good friend? Well, that theory is about to be blown, as he has an epiphany of his own and asks Amy to marry him instead of Paul.
Marry me, and everybody will leave us alone.
Despite having one of the most stressful mornings a person can have, Amy pretty accurately assesses the situation. She tells him that he doesn't actually want to marry her, he just wants to marry someone, and she's newly single. While they do have a connection, it isn't at all what he thinks it is, and he hasn't put in any of the work required to make a marriage work. She realizes that Paul ran out into the rain without an umbrella, and she has to catch him. Alone, Bobby once again speaks to the mysterious perfect woman. He lays out what he thinks his perfect marriage would be, one where they love and respect each other, but also keep enough distance to maintain their freedom. It's a great example of how the context of a show can completely change a song. Marry Me a Little is a very nice declaration of love, and it's a pretty good marriage proposal, but in context, he's not singing to anyone. There's no perfect woman who could fix him or heal him or make opening up and accepting change any easier. As difficult as it is to accept, no one is waiting. Act 1 ends with Bobby begging the world for the right woman and insisting that he's ready for her. Act 2 begins where Act 1 did, with the birthday party. Again, Bobby tries and fails to blow out all the candles, but says it doesn't matter because he doesn't need to wish for anything, as his life is perfect as it is. The gang agrees, and they all about what a great friend he is. Things escalate as they list off every great thing about him and ask what they would do without him. He remarks that they would just keep doing the same things, and none of them deny it. Everyone gets in a line, and they each do a dance move that is then repeated by their respective partner. But when they get to the end of the line, Bobby does his, and there's no one to respond to it. The group continues the number before dancing off and leaving Bobby once again alone. Each of the women privately tells their husband that they're worried about him all alone without a woman to take care of him. As this is happening, Bobby has April over at his apartment for the first time. She awkwardly admires the living room furniture, but he's clearly trying to get her more interested in the bedroom. Trying to make more of an emotional connection with him, she tells him a story about a male friend of hers giving her a butterfly cocoon as a housewarming present. When the cocoon finally hatched, her cat got to the butterfly before she could, so she called the friend and he admonished her for letting that happen to a living thing. She took the butterfly to the park and set it where she thought it would be safe, then went home and called her friend.
I went home and I called him back and I said, "Listen, I am a living thing too, you shithead." Well, I never saw him again.
Bobby clearly doesn't understand the point of the story, but he's expected to respond, so he tells one of his own. He tells her that once he went on vacation to Miami and met a young woman at a party who he instantly connected with. Together, they drove to a motel and got a room, but she asked him to go out and get champagne. When he finally found a liquor store, he couldn't remember where the motel was. He drove around for hours, but was never able to find it, and he never saw the girl again. April is moved by the story, but she doesn't understand how it connects to hers until she asks if the girl was the wounded butterfly.
Yes, that's it.
As things escalate, he hears in his head the voices of his female friends, and he imagines what they might say about April. That she's too dumb, too tall, too neurotic, too boring. At the end of it, she tells him that she loves him, but he's unable to respond. The next morning, she wakes up early to catch a flight, and Bobby asks her to stay. He tells her she's very special, but in the process, he calls her the wrong name.
This is awkward. This is so awkward.
Still, he encourages her to stay a bit, and finally she agrees, leaving Bobby regretting the whole thing. Back to the married couples, we get to see more of Peter and Susan. Bobby actually brings Marta to meet them, and they excitedly tell them about their recent trip to Mexico. Peter flew down to sign the divorce papers, but he had so much fun he called Susan to join him. They did get divorced, but they're still living together, and Peter says they're more married than they ever were when they were married. It's actually very sweet. Susan takes Marta inside, leaving Bobby and Peter to talk on the terrace. Peter compliments Marta, and then, out of nowhere, asks Bobby if he's ever had a homosexual experience. They both confess that they have, and Peter goes on about how it's totally normal to be friends with someone for a long time, and then suddenly want them sexually. Basically, it's nothing between friends. He even suggests that the two of them could possibly have that kind of relationship. Bobby laughs it off. We finally get to the last of our couples, Joan and Larry. They've taken Bobby to a nightclub where Larry is dancing like an idiot, and Joan and Bobby are drinking heavily. She makes fun of Larry before raising a toast to her first husband. Larry comes over and she raises another toast, this one to rich middle-aged women who waste their lives away. She ends it by saying the best of them are the ones who drink their troubles away and let themselves stay miserable rather than actually living their lives and trying to change. She complains about how no one smokes anymore, and Bobby says he never did, which she takes as a personal insult. She calls him out for never following through on anything and tries to force a cigarette on him. She calls him weak, and Larry suggests it's time for them to leave. He tells Bobby, right in front of Joan, that his mother was just like her and his father left her and always regretted it. So he married a woman who was so self-conscious she'd never leave him, no matter how miserable she is. Unlike his father, he says, he's happy. Joan tells Bobby never to get married and raises a toast to her second husband. Larry leaves to get the check, and Bobby tells Joan that he's a good man. She just stares at him. For a deeply uncomfortable amount of time. Finally, she breaks the silence by asking him when they're going to have sex. He assumes she's joking, but she flat out tells him when Larry leaves for work the following day. She tells him he's a very attractive man and that she'll take care of him.
But who will I take care of?
She seems shocked by that response, and despite his denial, she insists that it's an epiphany on his part. Joan and Larry leave together, but as they do, Bobby desperately asks her what you get out of marriage. The chorus of calls picks up again until he begs them to stop. Earnestly, he asks them, "What do you get?" None of them are able to give him the answer he wants, so he starts guessing. With his friend's guidance, he puts everything together, and finally he admits that he wants it. He wants all of it, and he's willing to take the risk and do the work. The married couples gather one more time in Bobby's living room for the birthday party, but he's nowhere to be found. They all speculate on where he is and why he didn't come before shouting happy birthday and leaving, 2 by 2, until he is finally actually alone.
Well, that was company. I just spent a lot of time summarizing it, and I don't know if anyone noticed, but kind of nothing happened. I mean, a lot happened, but nothing really changed because of it. Paul and Amy still get married, Joan and Larry stay together. Sure, Peter and Susan are divorced, but they're still living together, raising their children together, all that. And that's what I think is really, really brilliant about this show. This show is about Bobby and the way that he changes, so it makes sense that he's the only one that changes throughout. And at the end of the show, his life hasn't changed, but he has, and it's up to the viewer to decide if that has any impact on him or if it doesn't. Now, if you'll excuse me, this video took me about 6 months, and if I want to do Into the Woods, if I start now, I could be done in September. Happy New Year, everybody!